In 1891, a curious little board game appeared in American toy shops. A wooden slab, 26 letters, the word yes, no, and goodbye. It promised to answer questions from beyond, to speak with spirits, to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. For decades, families gathered around it, laughing as the planchette glided beneath their fingers. They thought it was harmless fun, but somewhere along the way, something changed. The laughter turned to fear, the stories grew darker, and the board that once whispered comfort began to speak of damnation. So what happened? How did a simple parlor game become a symbol of pure evil? This is the true story of how the Ouija board became a gateway to hell. After the Civil War, America was drowning in grief. Thousands of families had lost fathers, brothers, and sons, and they wanted answers the living couldn't give. So they turned to the dead. A new movement called Spiritualism began to sweep across the country. People gathered in candlelit rooms, hands clasped, waiting for raps on the table, or faint whispers in the dark. It wasn't seen as evil back then, it was a comfort, a way to say what had been left unsaid. At the center of it all were two young girls from New York, the Fox sisters. They claimed they could speak to spirits through mysterious knocks and taps. Their performances spread like wildfire, and soon, seances became a national obsession. But there was one problem. Speaking with the dead took time and patience. People wanted a faster way, something simple, something anyone could use. In 1891, the Kennard Novelty Company unveiled their solution, the Ouija board. Marketed as a parlor game, it promised to let you talk to the other side, without needing a medium. All you had to do was place your fingers on the planchette and ask a question. They called it a Ouija, a strange word said to mean good luck. Some say it came from the French ouïe and German ja, both meaning yes. Others believe the name was given by the board itself. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The dead finally had a voice, and the living were eager to listen. At first, the Ouija board was just another novelty, something to pass the time at family gatherings or parties. But as the 1900s rolled in, the tone began to change. People started reporting things they couldn't explain, planchettes that moved violently on their own, messages that predicted deaths, accidents, and disasters with eerie accuracy. Newspapers began printing stories of seances gone wrong, of people fainting, screaming, or claiming to see shadows in the corners of the room. What had started as innocent fun was starting to feel dangerous. By the 1920s, spiritualists were using the board in earnest, claiming it could open a channel to the other side. Some believed they were speaking to lost relatives. Others said the voices that answered back were not who they claimed to be. The church began to take notice. Priests warned their congregations to stay away, calling the board a tool of the devil, an open door that could invite anything. And as the fear grew, Hollywood followed. Early films in the 1920s and 30s began showing the board as something mysterious, powerful, and sinister. A simple game piece that could summon things better left alone. Letters from that era still survive, written by frightened users who swore they'd seen the planchettes move after everyone had let go. Some said their houses filled with cold air, lights flickering, doors slamming on their own. The world had started to believe that maybe the dead weren't just talking, maybe they were answering back. Everything changed in 1973. That was the year The Exorcist hit theaters, a film so disturbing that audiences fainted, screamed, and fled the cinema in terror. At the center of it all was a 12-year-old girl named Reagan, and a Ouija board. In the film, she uses it to speak with an invisible friend she calls Captain Howdy. Soon after, she begins to change. Her voice, her behavior, her very soul. By the time the story ends, the message was clear. The Ouija board wasn't a game. It was an invitation. What most people didn't know was that The Exorcist was based on a real case, the so-called St. Louis exorcism of 1949. A boy had allegedly become possessed after using a Ouija board to contact a deceased relative. Priests claimed to witness objects moving on their own, guttural voices speaking in Latin, and scratches that appeared across the boy's body. Whether true or not, the legend was enough to ignite a firestorm. Overnight, the Ouija board became synonymous with demonic possession. Churches began warning their followers to destroy the boards. Some even held public burnings, tossing the game into flames while reciting prayers. But the fear only fueled its power. Parker Brothers, the company that owned the rights, saw sales skyrocket. Every warning, every sermon, every rumor made the board more alluring. In the eyes of the public, the Ouija had transformed completely. It was no longer a bridge between worlds, it was the devil's plaything. Even after decades of fear, the Ouija board refused to die. If anything, it adapted. In the 2010s, a new generation discovered it all over again. The Ouija film series brought the legend back to theaters. Polished, modern, but built on the same old terror. That a few letters and a sliding piece of wood could unleash something unspeakable. On YouTube, creators filmed themselves playing in dark rooms. The glow of candlelight bouncing off nervous faces. Some laughed, some cried, some swore they caught something moving behind them on camera. Then came the Reddit threads. Hundreds of personal stories, planchettes that spelled out names of dead relatives, voices whispering from hallways, power outages that hit mid-session. Most of them ended the same way, with the word goodbye. Of course, not everyone believed. Skeptics pointed to the ideomotor effect, the idea that our muscles move subconsciously, guiding the planchette without us realizing it. To them, the board was nothing more than psychology and suggestion, a mirror reflecting the fears of those who used it. But even if science could explain the motion, it couldn't explain the feeling. That heavy silence after the first letter moves. The chill that creeps up your spine when the board spells out something it shouldn't know. Maybe that's why it still endures. Because whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the Ouija board holds a kind of power, not just over the dead, but over us. Science has an explanation for the Ouija board, or at least it tries to. It's called the ideomotor effect, tiny unconscious muscle movements we make without realizing it. When people rest their hands on the planchette, their bodies do the moving, not the spirits. To science, that's the end of the story. But the human mind isn't that simple. When a group gathers around the board, they shape one unspoken expectation that something will happen. And in that moment, every nervous laugh, every twitch of a finger, every subtle movement becomes amplified. The planchette starts to slide, and belief takes over. It's confirmation bias at work. When the board spells out a name we recognize or a phrase that feels personal, our brains latch onto it. We ignore the nonsense and remember the moments that make sense. Slowly, the illusion becomes real. But what makes the Ouija board so powerful isn't just motion, it's emotion. Fear sharpens our senses, it makes every sound feel closer, every shadow darker. Our imagination fills in the blanks, and suddenly the game stops feeling like a game. That's the paradox of the Ouija board. Even when we know it's fake, it still feels real. It blurs the line between science and superstition, between logic and belief. And once you've crossed that line, it's hard to come back. Maybe demons aren't real. Maybe there's nothing waiting on the other side at all. But when we place our fingers on that planchette and ask a question, something does answer. Maybe it's the collective unconscious. Maybe it's energy we don't understand. Or maybe it's simply the human mind echoing back from the dark. The Ouija board was never just a toy. It's a mirror, one that reflects our endless need to pierce the veil, to know what lies beyond death, to feel connected to something greater than ourselves, even if it terrifies us. For more than a century, it's been blamed for hauntings, possessions, and madness, but the truth is more haunting than any demon story. Maybe the board doesn't summon spirits, maybe it doesn't summon demons, maybe it summons us, the darkest parts we try so hard to keep buried. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark history of the Ouija board, check out my other videos exploring real-world mysteries, strange events, and the unexplained. There are countless stories out there, things that blur the line between truth, legend, and nightmare, and we're just getting started. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next descent into the unknown. Until then, keep your candles lit, and whatever you do, don't ask the board any more questions.